it was all right.
It's kind of interesting, the whole Ann Coulter talk that was going on.
Oh, yeah.
I'm just kind of curious, what are your guys' opinions on that?
On what culture?
On Ann Coulter, when she was supposed to, like, that was, I think, like, the second chunk of Tuesday's lecture. What I just, like, rewatched it and everything. And so, whatchamacallit. I'm sorry, my memory isn't going to be the best today, because I'm gonna level with you guys real quick. I have clinical depression and anxiety, and I take medicine for that. And because of doctor stuff, I was off it, and I'm now starting to get back on it, and so it kind of affects my memory a little bit. And so if I don't quite remember something, it's that, not that I don't know. So I apologize if it takes me a little bit longer to recall things, or if I like get lost, kind of thing. So
No problem.
just wanted to say that. So yeah, so let's just kind of talk about the Ann Coulter thing, because I think that was fairly interesting, and it's something that he might ask you guys about. What were your guys' opinions on it?
On whether or not she should go
Yeah.
to Berkeley to talk. I personally think that I'm okay with them prohibiting her from speaking. I don't think that's a big First Amendment issue, free speech issue, because it's just like somebody said in class, she's known for hateful comments, and that's not the type of environment you would want to welcome in a school setting. I don't think it's appropriate.
Yeah, because I mean, well, hate speech doesn't really promote thought or encourage other ideas. It's kind of one statement, and a very damaging one at that. Especially, like, I remember somebody brought up, like, if they're trying to have unity within the school and everything, and have a community, how can they quite do that if they're bringing in somebody who directly attacks parts of the community? And it's kind of interesting, because it seems, as I know, for Sacramento State, for student groups to have speakers come speak, I'm pretty sure you have to be approved by ASI for them to be allowed to come speak. And so I think that's kind of one problem that Berkeley is facing, is that they don't have that kind of middle person between the clubs inviting people to come and speak at the university, compared to so they should have the clubs asking for the people, but then the clubs should seek university approval before they invite somebody. Because, I mean, that's generally the policy from what I know of for other schools, and that's how you avoid things like protests and riots at events. Because actually, this did happen recently, that somebody who was supposed to come speak, he was a former president of I can't remember which. He was a former president of an African country that recently, like, it had independence, and it's now actually starting to become actually democratic. It was more of a illiberal democracy with him, where he was kind of more like a dictator and stuff like that. And he was actually going to come speak, dictator, but he also helped the country gain independence. So there's that that rub. And so he was invited to come speak at our African Peace and Unity Conference that one of our criminal justice professors puts on and is in charge of. But because of the controversial history of this person, there was a lot of talk about, like, should this person come speak and everything. And then from what I know of, the person actually, he said that he was sick and that he could no longer make it. But I do think it was part of the controversy that kept him from speaking. But I don't know, I think also I can't remember, the professor made a good point, was that there's a difference between somebody who's a conservative and they use facts to support their opinions compared to these shock jocks like Ann Coulter. I don't know. That's just kind of what I gathered from it. I don't know if you guys have any differing opinions. No? 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 Okay. Yeah, that's cool. I'm glad we're in agreement. That's always nice. So let's backtrack and talk about the op-ed cartoon. Who remembers what that was?
Oh man,
The one on
I just had it.
right?
I'm sorry, Amber, I can't hear you.
The one on Tuesday?
Yeah.
Wasn't that with the elephant?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Jordan can talk about it.
Oh, I'm not a pro on it. All I know is it was like an elephant on a bridge. And it had what, GOP,
Yeah, who's the elephant?
the Republicans, right?
Yep.
Or no, Donald Trump would say.
No, the elephant represents the GOP, who are the Republicans.
Okay.
I want you guys know that GOP is synonymous with Republican, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Oh, here we go. And then, and all the plans that he wanted to do within the first 100 days, right?
Yeah.
So that was the wall, the budget, the tax cuts, and Obamacare.
Uh-huh. And so, what was it? It was Trump. He was like dressed up as like a horse jockey,
Yeah.
like on top of the elephant who was carrying all this stuff. And
he was like, hurry, we have a few days or something.
And what were they hurrying across?
A bridge. A very small bridge.
And were there warning signs before he got onto the bridge?
Yep.
Do you remember what they said?
No.
The government.
Yeah, government shut
yeah,
down.
okay.
Yeah, and so what was the point? What was the point being made by this op-ed cartoon, Jordan?
Oh, that something about the government shutting down if something doesn't happen, right?
Yeah, you're on. So first 100 days. Well, it just happens to coincide that within his first 100 days is the new budget to be passed by Congress for the government. And what happens when if the budget isn't passed?
Then the government shuts down.
And why is there a possibility that the budget might not pass?
Because there's like 25% of people that want it, and not a lot of people don't, right?
No, think about the person who has the final say on the budget. After it goes, no, the people do not have any say on the budget, unfortunately.
You mean all those
Doesn't
emails
the
I sent?
president have the right to veto it if he does not approve of it, of like where the money's gonna go?
So if it goes through both the Senate and the House, and then it goes to the president, and then he can choose to veto it or not. Because remember, with the president, it's a either blank yes or no,
Right.
blanket yes or no, compared to like a state government who can do line item vetoes, which are specific things that they want to strike out of a bill. So he's like, oh, well, at first he was like, oh, if you don't have my wall budget in there, I'm gonna veto it. But he's compromising on that because he's realizing that, I mean, as the professor said, he's threatening them like, hey, if you don't do this, I'm gonna shoot myself in the foot.
So basically, there's a high possibility of the government shutting down within the next few days.
Well, so he realized that his threat was fairly empty, and so he's retracted that statement so far. But we shall see, because as we all know, our dear president is a very unpredictable man.
He's a character.
Character is one very small way to say it. I don't know. Did you guys ever watch Back to the Future?
Oh yeah.
So they're like the villain. Biff reminds me of our president.
Yeah, I can say that.
Yeah, this is reference. So, yeah. Okay. So, yeah. So he's trying to get all this stuff done, but it's pretty close to the wire.
Right.
So, yeah. You guys feel comfortable with those first two things of Tuesday's lecture? Okay. So now that we're gonna get more onto the, well, let's just finish it. Yeah, let's just finish up Tuesday altogether. So let's talk about, because he started talking about the legislature, because he was finishing up last Thursday's lecture. You guys remember that? And he was talking about the powers that the legislature has over the executive. What were those powers?
We have legislative veto, oversight, continuing resolutions, and supplemental appropriation, and office of special prosecutor.
Yeah. And so, do you guys feel comfortable with all of those concepts? Or would you guys want to review them?
Not 100%.
Okay, yeah. So let's start with the legislative veto. What is that?
So is that where if enough of the legislative branch votes against the presidential veto, that they push the bill through anyway?
And do you remember what it takes to do that?
Like 2/3.
2/3 majority in both the House and the Senate. So rather than just a majority vote.
Okay.
So 66% rather than 50%.
Right.
And so it's much more difficult to gain that 2/3 majority. And which is why it's kind of a last resort thing for the that's given to the legislature to override the executive. But it's like, hey, I mean, obviously if you don't have enough support, then how good of an idea really is it, kind of thing. So that's the premise of that. And what's the next one? Oversight? Yeah. So what's oversight?
I think that one was where the Congress appoints a committee or some people to oversee the executive.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so it's much more difficult to gain that 2/3 majority. And which is why it's kind of a last resort thing for the legislature to override the executive. But it's like, hey, I mean, obviously if you don't have enough support, then how good of an idea really is it, kind of thing. So that's the premise of that. And what's the next one?
watch the president?
Close. It's more of it's more of a review of actions being done or that have been done by the executive branch. So the example that the professor gave was Benghazi. And the reason why that's under the executive branch was because it was done under Hillary Clinton when she was Secretary of State. So she was under the president's cabinet. And so to investigate really what happened and everything with that and to determine its constitutionality, there is the oversight committee that looked into it.
Okay, so they just review his actions essentially.
Yeah, and determine if they're constitutional or not. And so it's kind of the legislature's way of doing kind of judicial review. But it's more of like if it's legal rather than constitutional for
oversight.
For oversight.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Yeah. That makes sense, everyone? All right. What is the next one?
It's continuing resolutions and supplemental appropriation.
And so, do you know what that is, Joseph?
No.
Does anybody? Yeah, I mean, he didn't really go that much into it in class and everything. And so it's supplemental appropriations and what is it again? Like honestly, this isn't something that he's talked about in previous semesters. So I'm a little like fuzzy on it. So what is it? It's continuing
resolutions.
Yeah, continuing resolutions and appropriations. I'm just curious to see what the actual like Wikipedia definition is. Continuing resolution and Alright, here we have short-term continuing resolution to maintain government operations released. Okay. So, okay. Yeah, so continuing resolutions are basically the way that the government ensures that certain programs are still being funded even if the government shuts down like the budget. Because do y'all remember when the government shut down a couple years back? I think it was just as Obama got his second term, I believe. And so it's kind of interesting that we're seeing this stalemate pop up again during this time. And so continuing resolution, and what was the second part? I apologize. I really apologize for this. It's continuing resolutions and appropriations, right?
Yes, and supplemental appropriation.
Okay.
Yeah, okay.
And I think supplemental appropriations is going to be budget authority provided in an Appropriations Act in addition to regular or continuing appropriations already provided. So, basically it's a clause within like an Appropriations Act, which if you guys remember is an act that determines how much money is budgeted for a certain project or program.
Mhm.
And so this is the clause to give in addition to regular or continuing appropriation. So it's basically being like, hey, you can add more money if need be. Does that make sense?
But you can't detract anything from it. Right.
Because it's supplemental.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
When you talked about this in class, I have the memory of him saying that this is kind of where Congress will put a lot of these must-pass bills in order to keep government from shutting down right before. Like this is the cause of it. This continuing resolutions thing.
Yeah. Because it kind of takes away from the budget and everything. And it's kind of like this continuing drain that isn't quite accounted for, if that makes sense. Because, yeah, and like the fact that they're hardlining that they want supplemental appropriation for these must-have things is also what's keeping them from being passed, because others don't want that certain program to have that ability to get more funds like that. Does that make sense? Okay. So, yeah. So essentially, this is the way that the legislature is able to continue to fund their programs and projects without the executive, because it's already been written in. If that, yeah, it's already been written slash. Well, that's for the supplemental appropriation, and then for the continuing resolution, that's more of a, hey, we need this, so you can't stop this, which is good in some cases, but can be detrimental in others, such as for important things like water and electricity that the government is part of. That should have a continuing resolution, but a continuing resolution for a bridge to nowhere, no. Does that make sense?
Right. Yeah, because it can be dangerous to implement something that you can't take away funds from.
And yeah, pretty much. Yeah. All right, next one. Is that the last one, or?
Office of Special Prosecutor.
Yeah. And what is the Office of the Special Prosecutor?
Is it I tried to Google it, and the closest thing it came up was Special Prosecutor. Is that the same thing?
It might be. Let's see what the definition they give you.
It said, is a lawyer appointed to investigate and possibly prosecute a specific legal case of potential wrongdoing for which a conflict of interest exists for the usual prosecuting authority.
Yep, that's accurate.
Okay.
So yeah, so with the Monica Lewinsky case for these, when presidents are put on trial, that's where special prosecutors come in, because they're supposed to be objective and on neither party side. And so, because if they bring somebody from the outside, then there's that lack of conflict of interest, which you just said, and everything. And so, and as the professor said, we've been seeing more of these as the years go by. And do you remember what else he said about them? Because I forgot, didn't he have a well, you mostly just really need to know what they are, really, rather than his opinion on it and what their effect. But yeah, so that's kind of the office of the special prosecutor. If a president's going to be impeached, or if there is something, possibly like maybe a case of treason might require a special prosecutor, so that it might not be seen as like, oh, you have a conservative prosecutor against this person that is liberal and is charged with treason. There might, in that case, there might be a bit of a bias that might be to the disfavor of the accused, and that's not how our criminal justice system works. You're innocent until proven guilty.
Didn't he mention that the office of the special prosecutor wouldn't be, it wasn't actually implemented?
Yeah, and it's I don't believe it's actually like written in.
Because it would give one person too much power because they're not yeah.
Yeah, and also note that the special prosecutor changes each time as to avoid the conflict of interest. But yeah,
Right.
you're right, Brian. It's not directly written in.
But only and rarely used.
Mhm.
Okay.
Which is why, like, my examples were so few.
Yeah.
I was just like impeaching presidents, other
Very rare
things.
cases. Right. Huh.
Yeah, I think Snowden might have had a special prosecutor, but he fled the country,
Oh, geez.
so there's that. But yeah, okay. And so these are kind of the things that the legislature has to kind of combat what the executive wants, to act as a check and balance. Did the professor say that these were very effective tools or not?
Well, I mean, the legislative veto strengthens the legislative branch and weakens the executive. Same thing with oversight. They all strengthen the legislative, and then the continuing resolutions certainly strengthens them because they can use that to get stuff funded that the president may or may not otherwise want to.
This is true.
So
yeah, for example,
effective.
I just like came up with another example for like supplemental appropriations or continuing resolution are just like, if Congress wanted to continue to fund Planned Parenthood, that would be a thing that they would do that, because the president is going to veto it. So yeah, sorry. Continue, Brian.
Oh, that was all my thoughts. I mean, you said, are they particularly effective? Well, they're effective at weakening weakening the executive branch.
Yeah, and we were just about to get to the special prosecutor.
Right. Well, and that one, that's so rarely used. It's hard to say.
But also think of the other ones. Besides the supplemental appropriations and the continuing resolutions, the others aren't really used that very often. Remember what the professor said about oversight? It's best done when Congress is of one party and the president is of the other. You remember that? Can you hear me?
Wouldn't
Hello?
that create a conflict though? Because if Congress is like Democratic, is that what you're talking about? The type of parties like Democratic, Republican?
And so that's why you see more oversight being done when Congress, both the House and the Senate, are of one party, a differing party compared to the president. And so think of that. How effective is oversight if it's only really being done when the branches are competing parties?
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. I was like, that seems like it wouldn't be a very good tool if it's most used when they're opposing parties.
Yeah, and so, but then it doesn't happen at all when they're of the same party. Because they're like, oh no, you're fine. You're doing the right thing. We don't need to look on you. It's fine.
Seems like they should just have the other party do it regardless.
Yeah. Then we'd have a bit more.
It would contribute to the backlog of, I guess, how much, he was also talking about how the Constitution is kind of set up such that, there's so much push or tug of war that things can get really, drawn out sometimes. And so, and be very, not very effective. So, I mean, personally, I'd like to say that, okay, yeah, the other party should do oversight all the time. But then there's also certain times where I think, the government really does need to speak with one voice regardless, because just to make sure stuff gets done in a timely manner.
Yeah, definitely.
I mean, I think that was, he talked about how FDR got quite a lot done during his first 100 days. And nobody's really been able to match up to that, because nobody really opposed him as to what he was doing. So
yeah, no, FDR he's definitely one of our most unique and most powerful presidents.
Yeah.
He was the one who really expanded presidential power with what he did with the New Deal and everything. And he was able to do it because we were going into a war and trying to get out of a depression. And so it's sad that we have to be at our rock bottom for partisanship to be set aside.
Yeah.
And I worry that that's where we're heading. I mean, we are already kind of seeing it, where we're seeing members of the different parties trying to kind of agree on things and kind of just be like, yeah, no, this is stuff that we need to be looking at, and we have to be careful about what our president is trying to enact and everything. And I mean, especially with the warmongering he's doing. So it's funny because they got some people who weren't on his side. McCain wasn't on his side until he bombed Syria. So that's a new one, but that's war and politics for you. But yeah. So that's kind of how.
What are your thoughts on the whole North Korea and United States thing?
So honestly, I've been a little bit out of the loop because I've been really sick the past couple of days. That's why why I had to cancel class and why I wasn't there on Tuesday. I mean, it's stupid, honestly, because we really don't need to be putting any more sanctions upon a country that is basically an angry toddler that can't do shit besides to its neighboring countries. Which, yes, is a great problem, but this is what North Korea does. North Korea does not have the firepower to actually start a world war. North Korea is considered to be crazy by all of its former allies. It's an outlier. And to really be giving it attention like Trump is doing what it wants. Because, it's like a crying child, It's like, if you pay attention to them, they'll continue crying and working themselves up, and suddenly they'll explode. But also if you leave them be, let them work their emotions out, then they'll calm down again.
It's kind of a cyclic thing, and it depends on who's president. We see patterns and trends with North Korea most often when they do their provocations.
When they're testing.
Right. They have to do these provocations in order to, they have to cause a fit essentially to get, to make people listen to them. And then, they say, okay, well, we'll de-escalate if you give us food. So, they get stuff out of doing this.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, they're continuing to increase their, and get better and better at developing their technology. Still not there yet, but one of the most recent, I say recent, but it's like within, I think I first heard about it 2014, is that they have a missile that can actually reach American soil now. Just getting it into the air is another matter.
Yeah,
but,
that's the other thing.
But if they were to say, for whatever reason, somebody was to push them too far, they, struck out, Seoul's, yeah, well, Seoul will be expected to be devastated. So that's 10 million people dead. And then, so I mean, it's, and then as far as the cycles go, that's important for government class, is that the conservative or the Republican viewpoints usually, or the presidents typically are more militant. And so, I mean, when Obama was in office, he had a very, I guess, lenient hand with North Korea. And so,
well, I mean, it's because he was busy with war in other places. But
right.
Yeah, and I really want to underline your point of that North Korea escalates to get food.
Yeah.
Because they are almost at famine level. And this is what they do periodically so that they get food and supplies.
So then if we see that it's a trend, why haven't we
Because
stopped that?
so one, it costs. So there's the principle of intervening in a different nation state, and the implications that has on sovereignty. That combined with who's going to be fighting this war, who's going to be sending their people to go fight in North Korea, and yeah, and thirdly, this might just cost more lives than the goal. And so a lot of it does have to do with just the fact of intervening. Intervention is a highly politicized thing. And that's what it would be if, because it would have to be a multilateral action, that meaning multiple countries deciding at the UN, the Security Council deciding, hey, North Korea is too much of a human security threat to their own people. They don't actually fulfill their basic responsibilities, which are just basic human rights.
Right.
And that needs an intervention.
That's the only way that war would start, if that happened.
Yeah, that's the only way an intervention would happen. And then we have Trump, who is, I don't know if he really realizes that that's why they escalate. And so he's making it more of a actual, oh, we need to crush them because they keep doing this and everything. They're a communist state. Communism, so scary. And really, I mean, he's making the situation worse.
Right. I think right now it's just you have two ignorant people who are have really high power, and so they're both, I guess you'd say, is peacocking, right?
Yeah, that's exactly. They're flexing their muscles.
Right.
They're being boys in the locker room. Sorry, guys. But yeah, that's exactly it. They're two major world leaders aren't competent in world politics. And one of them is a warmonger because he thinks that will make him be seen as great in history. So it's very likely that we're going to be in a war soon.
If that wasn't all complicated enough, just add in the fact that, our allies, Japan, very close by, and, they are much more threatened by this.
Exactly.
And so
that's another reason, that we're also trying to help protect both Japan and South Korea, who we have very strong ties to.
Right. And so, trade can only really flourish down there if there's an American naval battle group in the area ready to respond, to make all of the, essentially make people feel safe. So, that having Republicans tend to be known for tightening their grip, tightening these sanctions.
And so that's probably why he's
pushing
scared
it
right
more,
now,
which makes our allies, in Japan and South Korea, feel better about us. But then it also strains things with North Korea. So it's a tender game of tug of war.
Exactly, and I think the problem is that we had gotten to an okay level in the tug of war, and now it's being tugged back.
Yeah.
Yeah, but yes, and it's also important to note that for both Northeast Asia and Southeast Asia, South Korea and Japan are very key to the economies of several countries and keeping them going. So it's also about kind of the world economy, because you can't separate politics from economy as much as some might want to. They influence each other highly. So yes, there's a lot of the North Korea issue is very large, and very complicated. And there are many reasons why we shouldn't go to war. And also the reason why, like as you said, the sanctions have been tightened. And that, yes, that is something that Republicans do, but in tightening the sanctions, that means less food and supplies going to North Korea. So they'll be more likely to peacock or flex their muscles. So did that answer your question, Jordan?
Yeah. I know we can't go obviously too in depth about it, but for the majority, yeah.
Yeah. All right. So have a couple more minutes. We talked. So that was the legislative part, and then last Thursday, I know we kind of talked about, what was it? Crony capitalism. And we talked about the different articles.
What kind of capitalism?
Crony with a K.
Crony.
Yeah, do you remember that slide from Thursday?
Yeah.
Yeah?
Like the kleptocracy?
Yeah, kleptocracy, yeah. And so what's a kleptocracy? I can't speak. You know what I'm saying, kleptocracy.
I don't really know what it means.
Does anybody remember the definition the professor gave?
It's where I don't know the actual definition, but it's where a government uses its power to enrich itself or the members of its government.
Yeah, exactly. And that comes from the. Have you guys ever heard the term klepto?
Mm-hmm.
Well, so klepto is also a term for somebody who likes to steal things, and like compulsively steals things, and they're called kleptomaniacs. And so you can kind of bring that root word into kleptocracy. So they're stealing from the people. They're stealing money and resources to better themselves. And so, and then that led into the crony capitalism, correct?
Yeah.
Okay. And so that was the different, what articles were under that? Wasn't there the slide with like crony capitalism, and then it had a bunch of the different like articles that we talked about?
Yeah, one of them was giving away a store to get a store.
And do you guys remember what that article was about?
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
How like big stores get what is it, like the TIFs?
Yeah.
Like tax reduction. And then he talked about how like in reality that hurts the people more because like we're paying those taxes for these big businesses, and then sometimes they go out of business or they don't create like enough jobs, so it doesn't really help our economy as much.
Yeah.
And then we're just paying their taxes.
Yeah. Have you guys heard the word crony before? So it's an older term. If you're cronies with somebody, it's kind of an older term for like your friends that you're up to no good with, kind of thing. Like there's the mob boss and his cronies.
Oh.
Yeah. Does that make sense? A little bit?
Mm-hmm.
So crony, when you think of crony, think of like shady friends. And so crony capitalism is capitalism to help your friends. And so that was because remember to give away to get a store to give away a store to get a store was also connected with the Iron Triangle concept. Do you remember that? Because we have the interest group of and the lobbyists of Cabela, and we have the bureaucrats who want to kind of improve their town, and then you have the elected officials who want to stay elected and be seen as bringing jobs into their area. And so that's kind of how that's the triangle of cronies.
Wow.
Yeah. That makes sense?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And what were the other articles?
Those are the ones about Mr. Hatch.
I'm sorry, which one?
That was the one about Mr. Hatch, a Utah Republican.
Yeah. And what did he do?
He buddied up with the pharmaceutical companies who gave him funding in order to have legislation passed the way they want it.
Yeah.
So, I mean, even though some of these pharmaceuticals were dangerous, there wasn't really any legislation going on to regulate them.
Yeah.
And, he was rewarded, and the pharmaceutical companies were profitable, and the people suffered.
Yeah, exactly. And because he was like, okay, well, he was with his cronies, the pharmaceutical companies.
Right.
I'm pulling up this Google document just so I just want to have it written down, that slide for you guys. Come on, work with me. Yeah. So really, now I can't connect. Okay. Well, this is being a butt. So we had to get a store, and let's just say what the titles are.
I don't know the exact titles, but I know what was on the slide.
Yeah, that's what I was talking about. What were the titles on the slide given?
Well, the first one was giving away a store to get a store.
Mm-hmm.
And the second one was as companies seek tax deals, governments pay high prices.
Mm-hmm.
And then the next one was private profits from public works.
Yeah. So.
What was the second one?
As companies seek tax deals, governments pay high prices.
Oh, okay.
I'm pretty sure that was the independent expenditure one.
The second one?
Yeah. Let's look at your study guide.
'Cause I remember he did the whole sports agent analogy.
The basketball analogy,
Well, yeah.
and changing the rules to make it more. Well, that has to do with campaign financing.
No, for the businesses.
Oh yeah, yeah. No, I remember now. Yeah, you're right. Yeah. Okay. So this is gonna be the interest groups 2 articles.
This is the one that remember that time that we stayed late? It was me
Yeah.
and Jordan. We didn't write them down, but I know we went through them.
Yeah, I know. I remember. Huh?
I said I should have wrote them down when they were talking about it.
Yeah, we were busy though, so, and I mean, you can go back to the YouTube video and look at it as well. So, but yeah, so, but you recall from our talk, and if you guys watched it, that all 3 of these articles had to do with the Iron Triangle.
Yeah.
Everything. Yeah. So it is 6:56. I'm sorry, 6 minutes over. I apologize. I know that's nothing to the, what was it, like half hour that Joseph, Amber, and Jordan and I went.
It was good though. We
It
got
was good. I really liked it.
Oh yeah.
That's one thing that I like about, like, that's what I was trying to say the other day, was that I like that I don't have the class right after this, where I only have maybe 10 minutes to spare between. We can actually go longer if we have stuff to talk about.
Right.
It's time to kick asses.
Parents have to kick asses.
Oh, that's great.
That was great timing.
Oh yeah.
But did you guys feel comfortable with last Tuesday's and Thursday's lecture?
For the most part, yeah.
yeah.
Okay. Are there any residual questions?
This is fun.
No? Okay.
No.
Well, if you guys are all good, then I will see you tomorrow.
Later.
See you guys.
Bye. Have a good day.